Thanks so much, everybody. Yes, how we're going to talk today about how AI can transform brand equity intelligence into actionable real-time insights and prescriptive actions from brand to SKU level. Brand equity tracking traditionally has been done quarterly or annually, limited by kind of survey limitations. So AI really opens up fundamentally new applications for how brand equity can inform the business. And so let me tell you a little bit first about i-Genie. We are reinventing consumer insights with modern AI and data. We have some of the most demanding multinational clients in the industry. Kajoli just mentioned Christina Habib at Unilever, who's a client, Kenvue, Coca-Cola, Danone. Part of the reason that these large multinationals work with us is that we're very data science and engineer focused. We have native natural language processing in over 20 different languages, which is critical for brand equity to be able to create global standards across your geography. And as a result, we've been deployed in over 30 countries and growing. Most people know our founders. Stan Stanu is one of our founders who headed up insights at Coca-Cola and then at Unilever, where he was spending about $350 million on surveys and focus groups and panels and things like that. And he would get surveys back that said that Hellmann's mayonnaise was doing really well in India, which confused him because they didn't sell Hellmann's mayonnaise in India. And so he basically created a people data center with Paul Van Gent, who ran that, who's our other co-founder and COO, to look at how digital signals could be leveraged to make more accurate decisions. And so if you look at this founding team, it also includes advisors such as the ex-CMO of Unilever, the chief growth officer of Coca-Cola, the CEO of IRI Worldwide. We're really trying to tackle the big problem of the migration from survey to kind of digital touch points. And in fact, Dan wrote a Harvard Business Review exactly on how to do that and a book on how to leverage AI for marketing and product innovation. But enough about them. Let's talk a little bit about me. You might not know who I am. I've spent a career of catching the disruptive waves. In 1998, I graduated with a computer science degree from Princeton, went to a company called Trilogy to build e-commerce platforms for some of the largest players in the industry. Ended up going to their subsidiary PC Order, which IPO'd. After that, I went to mobile internet infrastructure, a company called Tantau that got acquired by the largest IPO in Canadian history. I helped build the social network for youth sports that was funded by LeBron James and Peyton Manning and Jared Jeter. That actually did not work. So I could talk about failures as well as successes. I founded my first company in 2010 called LocalVox, which is a social, local, and mobile marketing platform, driving people from online to in-store. Ended up getting acquired by the Blackstone Group. And so I've been through a bunch of these career catching waves, and the latest one obviously is consumer insights AI with i-Genie. And the thing that I've learned is, these waves can be massive, and we all know this, right? Like AI is the next big wave. And if you listen to Sundar Pichai of Google, it has the potential to be more transformative than electricity or fire, and it's going to be bigger than the internet, bigger than mobile. It'll be 10 times bigger than the industrial revolution, right? No pressure, right? So how do you think about these waves as they come? I think the secret, if you've ever been skiing, is you don't fight the mountain. You got to lean in, and the same is true with surfing. You got to lean into the wave and the nature of the wave. So we should talk about what it is about AI that should change the way we think about brand equity intelligence. The first is a fundamental truth from Stan. I have a lot of Stanisms in my head all day long. One of them is that customers don't want to talk to you, but they're happy to talk about you. And they do that in billions of searches, social posts, reviews, all these digital actions and statements that we make online. And so the key is we all want to understand our customers. And right now we've got that kind of like 1 to 10 meter view of a single customer, what we think is our customer. We use surveys to get hundreds or thousands of responses. And so this is a view of what like 1,000-meter view of that area might look like. And this is the view we're used to operating in, right? But now we're talking about billions of data points, really, really big data. And so the left is what 1,000,000 meters looks like, and the right looks like 100 million meters, and they didn't have one for 1,000,000,000 meters. But if you look at that right animation, this is the new world as you look at it, and it doesn't resemble at all that closer up view. So what we're saying is that AI requires a fundamental mindset shift. And so what are those mindset shifts that we need to think about? And how do we think about that in brand equity? So all these things are being said online. A lot of the time, people are using rules-based natural language processing to understand, kind of trend entities and what's going on. But the reality is you lose a lot. And so we can now move into large language model-based natural language understanding. And we've done that in our platform as an example. So we look at brand equity drivers like product superiority and trust and loyalty and affinity. And by applying the most modern techniques, we've had a 90% reduction in those posts that are unclassified, that don't kind of match up to any of the drivers. So we're now being able to get much more information out of every single post in the world. So it's about really kind of releasing the limits of the past that we've assumed. So for example, with brand equity tracking, typically track 5, 10 competitors, but we know that that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? In the hair care market, there's over 1,900 different brands. And even worse, if you look at the studies, 70% of new value creation in these markets is from the disruptor brands. So if you're not looking at the whole of the iceberg with your brand equity tracking, how valuable is it in really making decisions, right? And so this goes, removing these limits goes everywhere. A lot of the tools we see track hero SKUs or a number of PDPs, when you really need to start looking at every SKU. You need to start going from tracking macro shifts to connecting micro patterns within your markets. And I'll give you an example. We have a hair care client who was looking at not just a segment, but a sub-segment of the hair care industry, and is specifically heat protectorants. And they looked at the positive and negative drivers of good product experience. And what they heard was that people were generally complaining that heat protectorant could only be applied to wet hair. So they built a product to apply heat protectorant to dry hair, and it was an immediate Amazon bestseller, 4.7 star reviews on average compared to 4.2, and even in fact, no 1 or 2 star reviews in the first 30 days. It was an immediate hit. And it's really about figuring out these micro patterns and categories in the industry that you would never really dig down into that level of granularity, but you can now because of the expanse of the data set that you have at your disposal. And so this goes across the board also from tracking manually coded entities to AI discovering every ingredient, format, and benefit. Because if you have to manually code the trend that you're looking for, you have to know about the trend. And really, you want AI to help you predict the trends before you're too late. It also means that you got to think about all the different data sets that you have, all the silos, your search data, your review data, your social data, and stop having them in separate silos, NPD data, and really how can you leverage them all together, and how can you use them to triangulate the signals that actually correlate with business outcomes, and go from those siloed view to a single unified source of truth with interpretive models on top that correlate in the end to those business outcomes. And then it's also about time. We're also pressed for speed. Markets are moving faster than ever. We have to move from quarterly or annually brand equity surveys and insights requests waiting weeks to being able to get instant answers and, even better, immediate actions. So this is part of what we're building at i-Genie. And a big focus for us is not just on vanity metrics and brand equity score, but really correlating that to business outcomes. And one of the reasons is, again, another Stanism that's often in my head is that AI can be an amplifier of wisdom or waste, depending on the outcomes you optimize for. And AI creates human stupidity at scale. This is one of these things that hits you blunt in the face, right? And as we look at AI increasing the speed at which we create surveys or analyze surveys or just look at synthetic data, we really have to look at the data itself, because your successful outcome depends on your AI being rooted in quality controlled data with metadata enrichment, source data observability, and models that translate to business outcomes. So with all that as a preamble, I'm going to talk to you about how we're doing that with brand equity and redefining the role of brand equity in the age of AI. So quickly, what we do is we offer prescriptive consumer insights about brands, about products, about needs and trends, and new ideas. And so we take in search data, and instead of taking Google Trends, which is what a lot of people do, which is highly derivative, we actually go through millions and millions of search keywords representing over 71 billion search queries and get the real granularity. We pull in social data off Twitter, off Facebook, off Instagram. We transcribe TikTok, YouTube, Reels. We look at e-commerce data. And instead of pulling, again, just a set of SKUs, we pull the whole market worth of data on the review on the e-commerce sites that matter to you. Instead of looking at just brick and mortar and NPD, we actually look at all the digital NPD online as well, which is typically about 5 to 10x the size. And then we put it into our engine, and our engine understands every SKU, every brand. It reads every ingredient every claim, every benefit, every format. It knows the difference between a serum, a cleanser, a toner, etc. And we pull and even have category specific sentiment models so that we can understand each category and each customer post. And we pull that into our custom models so that we can have predictive outcomes, right? So for the one we're going to focus on most today is Brand Equity Pulse, which we'll go into. We also have CX Bench, which looks at a SKU level, all the positive and negative drivers of product experience at a SKU level, a segment or sub-segment level, at a retailer level. Trend Spotter to be able to predict trends, 18 months ahead, and with greater accuracy, and Innovate, which actually creates a universe of new product innovation ideas. And to give you a sense, one of our clients in the cleaning products space tested 20 of their ideas versus 10 AI generated and data validated ideas with consumers. 9 of the 10 top ideas, according to consumers, were actually the ones from Innovate. So this is the engine that we're going to go into. So let me tell you quickly about the brand equity architecture, because that'll make the demo make a little bit more sense. We have Buzz, which is your kind of typical mental availability, salience, awareness. And then the quality of mental availability is the sense of product superiority, the premiumness worth, the price value equation, trust, affinity, action intention, and advocacy. And we take all these scores and all these analyses and create a brand pulse score from 0 to 100. And so that's kind of like the fundamental high level about how brand equity works. What's interesting is that the brand equity score is highly correlates to market share, 0.71 to 0.79. And so you can kind of take a look at this and say, okay, well, which are the outliers who are, kind of, if you're above, like native, you have a higher brand equity than your market share. That means you're vulnerable, right? That you're outperforming what your brand equity in the market, and you should be looking at, if you're competing with native, how to attack. If you are native, how to kind of invest so you can kind of shore up your weaknesses. Or if you're below, you want to look at, kind of potentially how you can get greater market share. Now, this is an unfair example because Kerastase, for example, only distributes through salons, but proves the point, right? So this is Brand Equity Pulse. I'm choosing Olay just as an example. Olay is in the P&G family. They very focus on superiority, so you can kind of see a drop-off in superiority that they're probably concerned with. You can see all the different dimensions. One of the things you probably first want to take a look at is an overall market view across all these dimensions, right? And so unlike traditional brand equity tracking that tracks 5 to 10, we can track the entire market of competitors. In this case, I've pulled about 60 of them. And so you can order them to see who's the highest in BP score, or you can focus in on superiority and see who, Neutrogena, CeraVe, Aveeno, highest on superiority. But you may want to look at who's changing year over year. And those are more the SkinCeuticals, the EOS, the natives, et cetera. So you're probably going to want to dig in there as to like, what is happening? Who are the greatest gains in the areas that you care about? So, product superiority for, a P&G type company, right? And so if you actually plot it out and look at the greatest change in superiority and brand equity scores, you can see what we see in a lot of markets, right? That the disruptors are the ones that are making the biggest moves, the SkinCeuticals, Hourglass, EOS, natives, and that the large incumbents are actually losing share or relatively neutral compared to the overall growth. So if you're somebody like Olay and you're trying to figure out, like, how do you reverse that trend? What can you learn from somebody like those disruptors? You might, kind of go through our dashboards, or you can use our AI agent called Presto. So you could see brand pulse report cards for any brand. You could see e-commerce share of influence, social channel share of influence, who you're competing with on different channels. In this case, we're going to ask, what are the superiority drivers for Bubble, Native, SkinCeuticals, and EOS, and what can we learn from them? And because this is rooted in data, we can pull out, actuals that link to specific posts, specific things that people say, and the observability of the conclusions here. And you can see that it's pretty in depth, right? About EOS owning the lotion category, how SkinCeuticals levels clinical efficacy. You has deep dives in each one of the 4 various different trend analyses, and you can see actual mentions, and you can even click on them and get to the verbatims. We have various different graphs that you can cut and paste into PowerPoint. You can trend these things over time. In this case, what we really kind of want to do if we're Olay is like, well, okay, well, what can I learn and how should Olay compete on product superiority? So let's go ask Presto, right? And so we ask Presto again, And it'll give us very specific advice about leading with soft and hydrated feeling, because that's what we're hearing from customers. Championing the hero formats around cleanser, cream, and lotion, leveraging brand love, specific things to spotlight, like texture around velvety, fast absorbing, a big pulse power ingredient story around retinol, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So these are some of the things you can see with Presto. And again, you may want to go into specifics about like buzz, right? Like what are people talking about the buzz and associated, kind of areas that you want to dig into. Um, the one product that's complementary is CX Bench. We've talked about brand level information. Now we're going to go into SKU level information. Here we can compare Olay versus CeraVe versus Neutrogena. We can compare them across a specific retailer, specific segment or sub-segment, even down to a SKU level, and say head to head, like how are the reviews? What are the drivers of positive and negative customer experience? Here we can see that that Olay is actually outperforming CeraVe and Neutrogena. Does take a really big hit on Ulta, the bottom left. So like that's an area that you probably want to lean in as an outlier that you're not getting good reviews. But we can even go into a topical analysis. So for face, like what is it, kind of like that we are looking at an efficacy perspective around superiority? What are the key topics? You could see Olay has 48% compared to CeraVe's 43%. And we can look at the topics of positive sentiment that people talk about: visible results, long lasting, strong, etc. We can also zoom out and say, are there any other themes that matter to my customers? So here we're going to take a look at the average sentiment overall, and sustainability is a big advantage: 43% average sentiment compared to 13% and 20% for CeraVe and Neutrogena. And so again, what are the topics I want to go into? Reusable, refillable, recyclable. You can see this from our clients, right? And so, being able to dig into the actual discussions of your product and putting together these billions of touch points is absolutely critical. We can also, again, ask Presto to get a little bit more analysis of, for example, your buzz score and what exactly people are saying. Why are we lagging on search? Why are we lagging on social comparatively? We can compare them against Olay to, let's say, CeraVe, for example. And so you can see that my search is declining, their search is declining even faster. We can look at from a reviews perspective, what are my sentiment and average sentiment score, and see that I'm actually higher than CeraVe. So I have some advantages that I can take advantage of. Similarly, I can see that on social. And so I may want to then say, okay, well, what exactly are the topics and the verbatims? And how is Olay being talked about on social where there is superiority, right? And so, like, Presto gives you the ability to drill down into the actuals, give you very specific advice. Again, you see retinol 24 being praised as the holy grail and game changer of kind of anti-aging results. It gives you the ability to go at the high level thematic to the low level verbatims. And so this is the competitive advantage that AI unlocks. It's bigger, validated, enriched data sets, actionable insights at digital speed. And so I'll give you another example about how a pharma company responded to a competitor who they saw taking market share. They looked and saw that it was not a lasting trend, that their search volume was going down, their buzz score had reverted. So they knew it was a neutral trend. They were able to go into the weaknesses of that competitor and saw that people were basically 2.5 increase in negative superiority in the last 12 months, from 12.2% to 33%. Get to the verbatim level that people are complaining about the texture and the flavor, and then launched a campaign around flavor and put the dagger in the heart of their competition. All of this is at a quarter of the cost of traditional brand equity solutions. And so it's democratized with unlimited seats. It means you can start applying this real-time feedback to brand equity tracking, marketing activation measurement, new product launch impacts, competitor threat analysis, and even M&A. And so that's how AI can change brand equity intelligence so that you can deliver faster, cheaper, better, and compete in the age of AI. That's a lot. Very fast. 20 minutes goes quickly.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing insights. I have a couple of questions. I'm just wondering, what has been your biggest lesson that you sort of learned through this process? Developing an AI platform is never easy. And as you showed us just now, there's a lot of factors and a lot of real time, that you take into account, different data sources that get fed in. What has been your biggest lesson that you'd like people to know about?
The biggest lesson is change is hard, right? Brand equity tracking, you've been doing it for decades a certain way. You've baselined it. One of the nice things is you actually get data from day one going back a year, so you can still get your base, even 2 years. So you can get your baselines. But organizationally, like to make that type of switch where people are bonused based upon this metric or that metric is really, really difficult. And even within geographies, people have different ideas of what the right thing is. And so from the promise of technology to the implementation that actually impacts the business, there's a gap. And it's something that you really want a partner to help you work through. So, like, for example, at that quarter cost, what we see is people go from quarterly brand equity studies to annual. So, at one-fourth the frequency, and then add us in, and they still save 50%. And so, there are ways that you can work through the change management, but it's a lot about aligning people and really believing in that, in kind of the actionability and proving that out.
Thank you so much, Trevor. And you said it change is hard, right? But we're ready to make a change as well. So thank you again, Trevor.